Hi, how are you?
Hi. Ah, I keep looking at the calendar and I don't let it go too far from it. Time is flying. We have like 4 weeks. Let me see now.
Oh, I
One,
can't hear
two.
you.
Oh, all right. I probably forgot to headphone speaker.
You're good.
Can you hear me now?
Yes,
You can. Okay.
there we go.
Maybe it was on your side.
It probably was.
Okay, yeah, I
At
thought
first I was
maybe
like, "Why
I
can't I
had
hear
hit my audio because that's happened to me before.
you?"
Okay, yes, I was saying this time is flying. I have my calendar here,
Crazy.
and it's crazy. We have one, two, I think it's 4 weeks, 3, 4. And the semester ends, I believe, on May 11th. So May 11th is our last time we meet on Zoom. That's a Tuesday. So after today, which is the 13th, we have 4 more meetings. So I really got to watch our time. And I know I shouldn't be apologizing for other students, but yeah, out of all of my Zoom classes, this is the poorest in attendance. I know. So I'm not quite sure whether when they registered, maybe they didn't know that it would be Zoom. But after they found out, you would have thought maybe they would try to adjust their schedules so that they could be present. Is Couture, she's been coming every week. Yeah. So I know, but time continues. Hi, Katori, how are you? Let me mark the 2 of you in, because that's important, attendance, because when people find that, and we have 4 more weeks, Katori. Yeah, after today's meeting, 4 more meetings. And again, students wonder why they're not performing like they should. And a lot of times it's because, they're not putting in the time. I do feel that our Zoom meetings really, really help. They really help. We can discuss the information. We have the article presentations, which I think are extremely beneficial, because you notice that as I'm talking, I'm able to relate back to articles that have been presented. And again, I'll see if other students have submitted articles. I know that Katori's article isn't due yet. I'm going into Canvas. Let's see here. The best way to get to Canvas, I guess, is here and just sign back in. I've been working on different projects all morning, and I got a lot of stuff open. I hope it doesn't slow my computer down. Let's go to Canvas and our course, which is the food service management, and take a look at assignments just to see if we have any interesting articles that have been posted. And I go to the speed grader just to see what's here. Yes, Jacqueline joined us last week, I believe, to present her article, which was very, very well done. And as I look through, yeah, this was Amanda's. And that's Jacqueline's. And of course, Katori's is not due yet. And if I do this, and yeah, here's our due dates. So today being the 13th, I would have had Lee and John's, I call her Joe, Jay, sorry, Jay's article, which haven't been posted. Maybe they're going to post it after, before midnight, but we don't have, yeah, the only one we have was Jacqueline's from last week. And then maybe one or two of these will show up, and then I can maybe present some topics next week. And then Katori, you're not doing to the 27th. So that's it on articles. So we'll go to our next area. So we looked at articles. I do want to go to our timetable. That's very important. Today is the 13th. Yes. And discipline. Yes. I feel that we covered leadership well. The leadership chapter I finished last week. I also posted test 2 on chapter 14 and workforce staffing. I believe that test closes tonight at 11:59. So if you haven't taken your test, please take it before 11:59 tonight. So I will go to the discipline PowerPoint. There's a PowerPoint just addressing discipline. I will cover that today. I should be able to definitely finish discipline. That would move us into human resources. So I will still be in human resources next week. So if I don't get to human resources, I will cover it next week. But I definitely should be able to finish discipline today, get started on human resources if I can, chapter 15, finish up chapter 15 next week, which is the 20th. On the 27th, we will have Katori present her article, and then we'll start chapter 16, which is performance improvement. Then we also have a case study next week. Let's not forget. So that needs to be posted before class so we can go over the case study. All right, so before class, it needs to be posted. Then before class on April 27th, post your case study number 4 so that we can go over it. Again, that's the same day Katori's going to present her article, and we're going to start chapter 16. On May 4th, we're going to cover chapter 17, accounting procedures. And then we're going to, our last class, which I mentioned earlier, is May 11th. We're going to talk about marketing. And on that same day, I will open your last test on chapters 16, 17, and 18. Okay? So let's get started, because we really, really do need to, watch our schedule. I want to exit, go out of that, and go to my PowerPoint. And you will see that discipline. So here's the PowerPoint I want to present today. It's on discipline. And discipline is related to human resources because, again, how do we provide information to our staff? So this PowerPoint ties into chapter 15, which is titled Human Resources. And I have a PowerPoint just on discipline because discipline is not always easy to enforce, okay? A lot of managers feel uncomfortable when it comes to disciplining employees because, you know, our employees are adults. They're adults, and you know, it's uncomfortable having to, you know, tell someone, you know, I have to meet with you. And of course, we meet in the office and people sort of around and they say, oh, that person was just called to the office. You know, it makes you think of when you're in school and if you're called to the office, the only time you're not nervous unless you know that one of your parents or somebody is going to pick you up early because they have a doctor's appointment or something. But out of the blue, you know, you're wanted in the principal's office. You're going, oh my gosh, you know, am I in trouble? So the same thing occurs in the workplace. And discipline, I don't like the word discipline, but again, I can't think of a milder term to use, but I think discipline takes on its own meaning in the way that a leader or manager or director applies it. It's an application, okay? It's an application. And it's needed. We're going way back to our classical management because, again, they were very focused on structure, task, you know, again, discipline was a authority, and all that was tied into addressing someone when the task was not being completed according to you know, the standards. So we know that it's something that we can't ignore. If you ignore the need for disciplinary action, it's just going to get worse. And through my experience and probably your experience, if someone does not address issues and problems, eventually that issue or problem becomes your problem. And we have a case study coming up. I don't think we've talked about it yet, but it should be coming up. As far as if you don't address things, then you are neglecting your responsibility. You're not doing your job. So again, it can come back and be a disciplinary problem that now will affect you. So if I go to human resource chapter, I just wanted you to see that there is a area in this chapter, chapter 15, that addresses discipline, and it's on page 394. 394. We have been using this textbook for a number of years, and this is our 13th edition. And I can go back and remember about 2 or 3 editions prior to this 13th edition that we're in now. And they had just a little one paragraph on discipline. And I said, oh boy, this really is not going to help students that are going into a profession, may it be a dietetic technician or a student that's majoring in hospitality, and they have to manage a hotel or manage a food service department or manage any area. How are they going to successfully be able to address discipline with only a little paragraph? They have extended it through the years, but I still add my PowerPoint that I collected information over the years. And they did a good job in the textbook, because when it comes to discipline, yes, the first step would be an advance warning. That makes discipline easier if you give advance warning, because whatever it is that employee violated, and many things can be violated, from not being in uniform to arriving late, not completing your assignment for the day. We can go on and on and on. Just violating, the rules, regulations of the department. So again, on page 394, read the entire narrative on discipline, but they listed the steps, and they say that when it comes to any type of discipline, warning and is immediate, consistent, and impersonal. And that's important, that even if we look at that key concept, any disciplinary action taken should be immediate. The worst thing with discipline is the way the things just pile up. And sometimes in our own lives, someone does things that aren't correct. And you say, okay, I'll let it go. All right. And then that person does it again. Maybe it's the same thing, or it's something else that they do, and you let it go again. And after a while, a number of things can happen when you do not immediately address an issue. Let's talk about that. What are some of your experiences of what has happened if you did not immediately address an issue? Amanda, you have some, yeah.
Well, I've worked like quite a few different jobs. I worked at a
Mhm,
place for a while, and I was just like a hostess, front of house
mhm,
person. But in the back, it started to become an issue. Like a lot of the cooks would just take like really long smoking breaks, like a
mhm,
lot, like very frequently. And it got to a point where, it would be kind of dead in the restaurant. So, okay, they're
mhm.
outside, whatever.
Yeah.
But then all of a sudden people would start coming in, and we weren't
Mhm.
prepared for the amount
Got you.
of people we had. And then they'd be really slow because instead of prepping things, they were just taking a break and smoking because it was a slow
They
day.
were behind.
Yeah.
Yes, yes.
And they wouldn't really get disciplined for it, so it would constantly be a problem.
When it is not immediately addressed, it gets worse. It gets worse. And when you finally address it, it's not as effective, because people start thinking that this is the norm. And why all of a sudden are you complaining about something that I've been doing for a while, like that smoking? I'm sure they took it very personal. Oh, you're just picking on me because you're a non-smoker, or you're just picking on me because I smoke, or whatever. If it had been immediately addressed, then it could be directly um, related to the workplace and how it's affecting, the meals coming out on time and being prepared for the customers. And I mean, immediately it sends that message. The message is a lot clearer. But if it is ignored and left to continue over a period of time, uh, sometimes we even gave a name to that. We call it past practices. And if you let your employees do something over and over again, it's a practice that's now acceptable. And when it comes to a manager, it makes it very, very difficult to uh, correct it at this point, because now people can, what would I say, interpret your disciplinary action to be because of other reasons. But if it had been immediately addressed, you can say, there's frequent breaks because of smoking, and now it is interfering with the work environment and the flow of operation, but it's got to be addressed immediately. And that's very important. The other thing is consistent. Let's go back to the smoking. Oh, some days it's okay to take frequent and long smoking breaks, but today is not okay. Even during times when you're not busy, they should not be allowed to take those frequent and long breaks. Because when you're not busy, the customers, there should be other assignments given. Yeah. And as a manager, you are really paying people for really basically not working. If you think about it, you're paying them to smoke. So again, it has to be immediate and consistent, meaning that whether we have a lot of customers or not, you only get a certain number of breaks and for a certain amount of time. And that has to be consistently followed each day. The other thing is impersonal. So we can't address it like we don't like smokers, and we don't like the fact that they're smoking. We are addressing the fact that the work has to be done. And we're literally paying them for not working on the job. So we do, and we have to take the person out of it. It's the action. We have to address the action. The action is that you're not on the job. You're not in the kitchen, you're not at your station, you're not doing your duties, your responsibilities. Yeah. And that takes it off of that person, because that person always feels, well, you're always signaling me out. Okay. Um, you don't like the fact that I'm smoking. And we want to take all of that out. And there's a way of addressing. We have to address the action. We have to address the violation. So the violation is not that they're smoking. The violation is that they are spending excessive time away from their duties. Yeah, yeah. And that's how you have to address it. So it's how you say it. It's the action that you address. Okay. And the action is not getting the job done. Yeah. And the other area is based on known expectations. Those known expectations is their job description. They were giving their job description. They have to get those duties and tasks done within a time frame. And of course, they're not getting that done if they're taking frequent and long breaks. And then legally defensible. I really do feel that is legally defensible, because how are you going to pay someone for time that they didn't work? Yeah. So whatever that disciplinary, that violation is, that's what we have to look at, that it's immediate, consistent, impersonal, based on known expectations. And when we get into this PowerPoint, that's the main thing. Employees have to know what your expectations are. And we're going to go over that, because people can easily say, oh, I didn't know that. People love to say, I didn't know that. But we take that out of the equation. Everything is known. Everything is clear, okay? And we're going to talk about ways to make sure that it's clear what they should be doing. Because sometimes it's the manager's fault. They're the blame for example, it's that manager is to blame for the excessive smoking at this point, and not disciplining and addressing those issues. So it falls back on the manager to actually be the blame for those for those violations. Those violations go back to that manager. So let's get started. When I got this information, you can see it's been years ago. They highlighted Charlie Trotter's, which he was a very, what would I say, famous, well-known chef, particularly in Chicago. And his particular restaurant, you would have to make reservations months and months in advance in order to eat at that particular restaurant. And this was his philosophy. He said, I hire every employee with the optimistic sense that he or she will succeed. And we're going to talk about that. That's hiring a person. Yeah, look at that word hire. So in this chapter 15, we're going to be talking about the hiring process. So it could be the manager's fault, or it could be the reason for those violations because of their hiring process. And we're going to talk about, if you hire someone, you should really, really want them to succeed. Okay. I don't like to give up on an employee, but if an employee is not performing up to standard, I will let them go. Okay. So this is a good standard to follow. It starts with hiring. It moves to making sure that that person succeeds. Yes, they play a part in their own success, but yet, we're going back to the leadership chapter we just left, that there are things that a leader can put in place to help with that person's success. So that's that dual hygiene that we were talking about. That is not, yes, that person has to take on that responsibility of motivating themselves, but also when it comes to the work environment, that also needs to be, that plays a part in someone's ability to be motivated. This I'm going to skip. This overview, causes of employee discipline problems. So we're going to look at the causes. Preventive and corrective discipline, progressive discipline. Then we're going to look at the do's and the don'ts of employee discipline. Critical factors that help you know when it's time to terminate a problem employee. And then we're going to look at some legal guidelines, because there are certain laws and regulations that we do have to adhere to in the workplace. So here we are, and we also have a definition of discipline in our textbook on page 394, but it definitely ties into this definition: action taken by management to encourage employee compliance. So discipline is a form of encouraging employees to be compliant. So we can put barriers in place or obstacles that can create situations that employees are not compliant. And the first one we already talked about is not being immediate and not addressing the issue at all, okay? That in itself can send a message telling employees, well, you don't have to be compliant. You know, no, you shouldn't be taking long smoke breaks and frequent strong breaks, but it's okay. When you don't say anything, it's just like that saying, you see something's wrong, but you're just as guilty if you ignore it or you don't speak up against it. And that's so when you're silent, that's another way of saying, I agree with it and it's okay that, that behavior is occurring. So encourage and compliance with the company's rules. So you've got to have rules, standards, and procedures. And we talked about rules, standards, and procedures. Or is it coming up in this chapter? It's coming up in this chapter. and the rules, definition for rules, standards, and procedures. So technically, we have already started with chapter 15 because, let me, or was it covered? Wait a minute. Let me see. Sometimes I know information's in the book, but I'm referring to the wrong chapter. I believe the definition of the rules are in chapter 13. Let's go back to chapter 13 because we're tying our information together. And I know we talked about rules. Yep, I'm correct. On page 340, and it is chapter 13. Chapter 13, page 340. And it is under the planning area. So this is one of the functions of management under planning. So you plan for compliance. So if a manager does not put things in place to prevent things from happening, and that's part of the plan. So when it comes to rules, standards, and procedures, you see on page 340 the definition of a policy, guides for decision making. And then we have procedures, detailed guidelines for planned activities that occur regularly. And then we have the definition of rules, written statement of what must be done or must not be done. If it is not written, you don't have it. You know, yeah, you say, oh, every time I hire someone, I tell them what the rules are. I tell them that they're not to smoke in the kitchen. I tell them that they're only allowed to smoke during their scheduled break time. Okay, they verbally told them that. It's got to be in writing. Rules, standards, procedures must be in writing. Proper disciplinary procedures encourage employees to develop self-discipline. When it's written, and it has to be provided upon hiring. It's at the very beginning, before they start working, before they take their first break and they're taking more smoke breaks than what is allotted. All of that's written, and it should be clear from the very beginning. Discipline should not be equated with punishment. So if it is addressed immediately, if it's consistent, if it is definitely impersonal, it is again a expectation, knowing they receive the policies, procedures, rules. It again it takes it out of that category of being a punishment. Yeah, because punishment, it tends to be something that's unexpected. It's something that yeah, you didn't know you weren't supposed to do it, or maybe you did know you weren't supposed to do it, but you were sneaking and you got caught. you know, but the bottom line is it definitely will reduce the incidence of violations. I love the causes of uh, of discipline. Uh, why do employees engage in behaviors that leads to disciplinary problems at work? And many times they do it because it's not in writing. And if it's not written, then they say, "Oh, I can always say I didn't remember, or I was never told." Okay, so it opens up a area for people to be able to what do they say, stick holes into it, because it's not something that's written. And again, rules, procedures are vaguely written. So they can be written, but they're not written in detail. They're not specific enough, misunderstood, and ignored. So whatever's in writing, it should be a committee of people sitting and writing policies, procedures, and rules, so that you have many people looking at it, and someone can pick up on the fact that, here's a rule on smoking, but we didn't put in here the designated area to smoke. That should be in the rule, shouldn't it? Yeah, where, because again, definitely now there are some places that do not allow smoking on the premises. Even going outside is not going to be, permissible, because for example, in the county college, we're a smoke-free environment. Even on campus, I've seen students sit in their car and smoke, and that's violating that. And I'm supposed to be on campus smoking, and I'm supposed to be outside of a building smoking. I know, but again, public safety can again catch them, and again, I don't know. I think there's a fine or something of sort there. But again, it's got to be very clear. It needs to be verbally read. It should be gone over. A copy is given to that employee, and they sign that they received a copy. And this is when I come up, I mentioned the employee handbook. Employee handbook is an excellent way to have everything uniform. Every new hire is given the same information. And you go through that handbook from cover to cover, and that last page, there should be a signed page stating that it was given, it was reviewed, and that you have a copy of it, and you sign it, and it goes into, you keep it on record, showing that this person did, in fact, receive that information in writing. Employees lack sufficient abilities. Now, I'm just going to read these because we're going to go through each one of these causes individually. So, quickly, we already went over the rules and procedures. If they're written, they could be vaguely written, misunderstood, ignored. Employee lacks sufficient ability, knowledge, skills, and aptitude. That's that hiring process. Employees have personality or motivational problems. A lot of this just comes up. This takes a number of things to address. but it can be addressed and resolved in many instances. Troublesome environment factors, both internal and external. So again, we're going to talk about ways to alleviate some of these factors that can, lead to disciplinary problems. So we already talked about this first cause pretty well. Those rules, procedures are written, vaguely written, misunderstood, ignored. Okay. So again, it's got to be in writing. It has to be reviewed. It has to be discussed. A copy has to be given to that employee, and a signed paper that they received it. And I have it, for example, Katori, you took Dietetic Foundations back in the fall, remember? And we have a student handbook and that's the same thing as an employee handbook, where you have just all the guidelines, procedures, everything that you want them to know about the workplace and their job and parking and uniform and all just the requirements, everything in one place. Trust me, it's much better than having to remember, oh, I have to go over uniforms. Oh, I have to go over this. It's all in one packet. And again, you have a page for them to sign. Okay, so we covered that pretty good. And again, when it comes to those written rules and policies, these are just some examples of what you need to have rules and policies on: alcohol sales, employment of minors, minimum wage and overtime requirements. We went over that already. That should be in the employee handbook. And again, covered prior to them doing orientation, prior to actually starting to work, and right after they've been hired. Health code provisions, fire safety regulations, general rules pertaining to breaks. There you go. Time clock issues, parking restrictions, uniform requirements, hours of work, absences, tardiness, sick days, smoking. Look at that right there. Meals, drug and alcohol issues, as well as employee dealings with guests and customers. So it's pretty extensive, but it's all in a handbook. So we have to ensure compliance, and it does start with the job interview. So we're going to be talking about even hiring, when you can ask them questions, hypothetical situations about how they would handle certain issues or problems that can occur once they're working. Or you can ask them a hypothetical question about on their previous job. Can you give me an example of when you had a conflict with a coworker, and how did you handle that conflict? That's a very good question to ask someone during the interview. That might help us with one of those other problems that we're going to take a look at, when it comes to just their ability to work well with others and to get along with other people. So again, that could be helpful in that area. During new employee orientation, in the employee handbook, during day-to-day operations. So all of the above is great, but if you're not following and making sure that the handbook is being adhered to on a day-to-day basis, then all of that is going to be, it won't mean anything. Rules, regulations mean as much as how they're implemented and followed. So they need to be followed on a day-to-day basis. You address them again at staff and department meetings. So just because you gave them that handbook during orientation, it's an ongoing review of rules and regulations, especially if you see some a gradual deviation from the policies. And yes, you should address those that are directly violating. And it never hurts to address that issue in a department meeting, okay? There's your during disciplinary meetings. And we already said that, you know, that staff, I think it was called staff rounding in the previous chapter, how you motivate people by 15 minutes with each employee a week, just bringing them in an office, talking about, you know, their job. You know, that could be a good time that if you see some you know, violations, it could be brought up at that time, but definitely immediate. It can't be, you know, something that you delay. Doing annual and semi-annual performance reviews. So performance reviews will be addressed also in this chapter. Now we're looking at that second cause. And this second cause is not only that first cause, not having written policies, procedures, and making sure that they're being implemented, but hiring somebody that did not have sufficient abilities to begin with, knowledge, skills, and aptitude. And I've seen this before, that they hire a person, and then after they're hired, all of a sudden this person doesn't speak English well enough. You know, you hired that person with that ability, you know, with certain aptitudes. You hired them. So how do you expect to get a totally different person once they're working? And I've seen it. Someone that has a strong accent, and you know, it may be students or customers are complaining that they don't understand that person and they have a communication problem. Again, to discipline that person, tell them they need to go to a class for English as a second language and all this stuff. You know, it's very unfair because that person was hired based on those abilities. Those employees who do not have the necessary skills, abilities, and aptitude to perform their job duties properly often find themselves in troubled water. Management is often to blame because the interviewer did not match the right applicant with the right position, hired a misfit altogether. That misfit means that you analyzed the job and you determined what skills, abilities, aptitudes are required for that person to do the job. You wrote the job specification. Then you interviewed and you went through job applications and you hired that person. That person should not have been hired if they did not meet the minimum standards. And that's important, that you make sure that that person meets all of the job requirements. Those are the job specifications. Okay. Sometimes management hired a perfectly qualified individual, but then failed to provide the proper training and supervision to ensure his or her success. And that can also happen. I always think back when a person applies for a job, they have these high expectations. I think all three of us have been, excited about applying for a job. And you say, oh, I really want that job. Think back, I really want that job. And then you get that job. Management needs to make sure that those expectations stay as high as you can keep them up there, because those expectations can go from here to here, or their first day if they do not receive the proper tools. The first tool is orientation. Second tool is training. And I've seen at the very beginning that that person wasn't given an opportunity for success from day one, because orientation, training was absent. That person was put on the job to do a job without adequately preparing them. And some of us can recall being in that situation where somebody says, "How was your first day?" And you say, "Oh my gosh," and you all and your motivation goes from here to here, and sometimes you don't even want to go back on the job. I remember when I was in high school, my cousin and we went looking for a summer job. Now, my cousin was older than me. She was about 3 years older than me. And I was just at the age to work. And I had never done any waitress work at all. And they hired me that day and put us to work that day. And I was awful. When I went to the table to take the orders, I couldn't remember who ordered what, and my first day, I just felt awful. So my cousin, she talked to me, she said, do this, do that. So she made me feel better. I went back the second day, I did much better, but who should have trained me? I know. If it wasn't for her, I wouldn't have showed up again, because I was just that disappointed. I was frightened. I just felt miserable. Let's look at this third cause. Third cause: employees have personality and motivational problems. Now, first of all, if it wasn't for my cousin, I wouldn't have shown up. Or if I did show up, I would have definitely had a motivational problem. So that would have been an issue right then and there. So do not try to take the easy way out by only hiring individuals who have previous hotel or restaurant experience. This is a common problem. And we talk pretty much about job specifications, those minimal requirements. And it depends on the job and it depends on that interview. And if someone has years of experience, you need to really have some good questions to find out if that person is willing to continue to learn. Because some people think they know it all. Yeah, I worked here, I worked there, and you hire them, you take them through orientation, you start training, and they don't take the training seriously because they really don't think they need to be trained at all. You know, because I've done this job for years and years. But you want somebody that's going to be flexible. I would hire a chef in healthcare because you know I've been in healthcare, well, some commercial, but healthcare has been a big part of my experience. Long-term care facility, we have special diets. I hire a cook that cook predominantly, or all their experience have been in restaurants and hotels and so forth. I want to find out, number one, their knowledge on special diets. And if they don't have a particular knowledge, are they willing to learn and to adapt on how the types of seasoning? You know, they can't be putting a whole lot of salt into the food. I'm not going to be ordering a lot of processed items. You know, I'm bringing in fresh ingredients. And from there, you've got to make sure that the food's prepared with minimal amount of salt, with minimal fat. And again, I have diet orders that we have to fill here. And, you know, there's no way that I can feed, even on my regular diet, a diet that's high in salt. Yeah. So again, you know, can they adapt to following special diets? So there's a difference. Managers that do this are trying to reduce training costs. Yeah, you hire somebody with experience and say, well, I don't really have to train them. And they often feel that an experienced applicant can be up and running in no time with little or even no training. And that's not true. You could have worked for 20 different restaurants, but you need orientation and training for that particular food service operation. Every operation is different in some way. Each operation is different, just like I said, and while an applicant who has previous experience is not necessarily a bad thing, this should not be an overall determining factor when hiring new employees. So that interview is very, very important. You know, questions to see their willingness to learn, to adapt, and do things different based on your organization. Here's that troublesome internal environment. Example could include improper or lazy hiring procedures. We go back to hiring. You know, we hired somebody that was not a good fit to begin with. You know, interviewing is very important. You know, not only the verbal communication, their ability to answer questions, but their nonverbal. You know, we're looking at nonverbal behavior, facial expressions, you know, their posture, how they're dressed. You know, you can hire somebody with poor hygiene. You could have possibly picked up on that during the interview. Yeah. So that's important for food service, because I have had employees, and not that I necessarily hired them. They were hired by a previous, director, and this person comes in daily with dirty uniforms. It's questionable whether they bathe. You know, I've had employees with body odors. That's very uncomfortable, having to bring someone in and talk about their hygiene. That's not easy to do. But again, when it comes to, I would say, any organization, but particularly in food, hygiene is so important. uh, Failure to train employees, poor or inadequate supervision, missing tools and supplies, equipment that is in disrepair. All of this goes back to really the manager. Yeah, because these are things that we have some control over. Okay, some control over. And in many instances, yeah, if somebody improper, lazy hiring procedures, again, yeah, that's your fault. You should have picked up on things prior to hiring. But once you see that that's the case, it's addressed immediately. So again, we can, let that person go if they don't improve over a certain period of time. This is the external. The external, more and more, we're addressing external issues. In the past, we would say, well, we want that person to leave all their problems outdoors. Don't bring your family problems to the workplace. Yeah, we still want people to be aware that if that problems, it's their responsibility to address their external and also their internal issues. But their external issues, we want them to address them so that they do not affect their ability to do their job. So they could have problems with family members, marital or relationship problems, legal problems, drug, alcohol problems, financial struggles, problems at school. Now, we definitely should sit down and let that person feel that they can talk about these issues. So we don't want to close the door and say, does this have anything to do with the workplace? And they say no. You go, wham, you close the door where I don't want to hear it then. So no, we don't do that. We don't do that. We definitely need to listen. And there are organizations that provide, services. May it be counseling for family problems, could be marital problems, legal problems. They give workshops and just resources so that this person doesn't feel like they have to keep dealing with this problem. So at least resources, having, a counselor that you can refer your employees to. So again, services, just having some type of, ability for them to go to someone. Preventive discipline, any action taken by management to encourage employees to follow standards and rules is an effort to prevent infractions. So yes, going back to Charlie Trotter, as far as when you hire somebody, you want them to succeed. And you want to look at each one of these areas that should be addressed, from the written policies and procedures to, making sure that a cause is not because of your, uh, you know, uh, improper hiring procedures, and that if they do have internal problems, that we address them immediately. And internal problems, there was a list. It could be the lack of supplies. It could be the lack of training. Again, go through that list, and as a manager, making sure that all of those areas are not a cause for that person, not complying and following work procedures. Preventive discipline encourages employee self-discipline. That self-discipline is very important because we're hiring adults, and you don't want to feel like you have to constantly be behind them and telling them the same thing over and over and over again. Once you've given them that verbal warning, you want them to now take on that self-discipline. And we don't want it to move to a written warning. So corrective discipline is an action that follows the violation of the rule. And corrective discipline, first step is that verbal warning, by the way. We're going to talk about verbal, written, and then we call it progressive discipline. Progressive. The goal for management when this occurs is to discourage further infractions and ensure future compliance with established standards. So we follow progressive discipline. This occurs when the severity of the discipline action increases in relationship to the severity of the violation. Now, that oral or verbal warning is given for certain violations. Now, a verbal warning is not given to someone who threatens someone. Anymore, if someone threatens someone, that's a serious violation. If somebody says, after work, I'm going to meet you in a parking lot, or something of that nature, implying that they're going to, cause harm to someone else. Okay, so that goes beyond a verbal warning. Definitely, if there's any weapons or alcohol, things of that nature, there's certain violations. We just don't give them a little smack on the wrist and say, don't do that anymore. It becomes a violation that was so severe, you jump over the verbal warning. So you have to know, again, number one, it's in your handbook. So your employees know what's considered to be minor, where they will get a verbal, and what's considered severe, where they would be immediately escorted off the premises and put on suspension until further investigation. Yeah. So again, oral or your verbal warnings, written warnings, suspension, termination, are the usual disciplinary actions when a traditional progressive discipline system is instituted within the hospitality or food service industry. So I want you to read over each one of these violations. They're also, parts of the progressive discipline. Time has run out. Next week, I will pick up here, and then this will take me into the PowerPoint, which is on chapter 15. Okay, so read chapter 15 for next week. I'll pick up just to review, finish up on this particular PowerPoint, and you'll be surprised how this disciplinary PowerPoint addresses a lot of the information within chapter 15. Because we already talked quite a bit about hiring, didn't we? Yeah, we touched on hiring. We touched on orientation and training. So this is really what chapter 15 talks about, that hiring process, orientation, training. Again, it addresses discipline. So I think we covered pretty good. Any questions? Okay, good class. We're still on schedule. And again, we only have 4 more Zoom meetings. And this semester is just about over. So take care.
All right, bye-bye. Have a good one.
You too. Thank you for attending.
I have a question for you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's about life cycle nutrition later today. So I have a doctor's appointment, but it's at 4:30.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm hoping it won't last an hour into our Zoom meeting.
Okay.
But
yeah.
I was just wondering if it does get done a little bit later, is it possible to join late into the Zoom meeting, or should I just wait and watch the recording?
You know what? Join